One of the things that's required for all these bridges to be built, right, for all these connection points to happen, is there needs to be some kind of interoperability glue that holds the whole system together. If that doesn't exist, the systems can't be built. Now that interoperability glue can take on many different forms. I mean, one of the forms it can take is it can take the form of interoperability standards. Things like SIF, the School's Interoperability Framework, things like PESC, these XML standards for transporting data back and forth. That's one way it can take. It can also take the form of web services and automated programmatic interfaces, APIs that actually allow for one service or one piece of software to call information from another one. And if those are standardized, all of a sudden a world opens up of points of service being built that can call all sorts of other functions. And those systems that are built that have those kind of consolidated, common interfaces in place, that interoperability glue in place, those systems will be able to participate in a much bigger ecosystem and a much more, have a much larger venue of data, content objects, educational things that they can bring into the visualizations they're providing for teachers, the dashboards they're providing for teachers, the ability to give teachers, students, principals, superintendents the kind of information they need to actually create these innovative learning spaces.
I imagine that if I were a teacher again, and I spent a lot of time in the classroom, this kind of data, these kinds of systems that we're talking about with really integrated tool sets and information would be absolutely empowering. That I would really be able to serve the way I'd always imagined I wanted to. That I could know how each of them was doing in a really deep and sentient way and deploy assets to them in real time that were just targeted for their particular learning style and for their needs at that moment. I think there are some really critical things that business and industry can do in partnership with schools and with districts and states. And I think those things are, one, that we could begin having better conversations and better dialogues about the art of the possible. I think, two, that we could move toward greater standardization of the system in some ways. That would mean common academic standards, which many states are moving towards. It would mean common data standards, which many states are moving toward as well. We're beginning to launch a movement with that. And it would mean common content interoperability standards. And as places begin to take those on, as vendors begin to agree to adhere to those kinds of standards, we could see a transformation of the education ecosystem, where products are better able to scale, and we could really enable market forces in a way that we haven't seen enabled before.
So that work of connecting those systems together is what's allowing some real innovation to happen. And 6 states have, many states applied, and 6 states were accepted to become innovation labs. And we're working with the Council of Chief State School Officers to develop safe havens, develop these districts and schools where this innovation can happen, and those teachers can actually experiment and enter into next generation kind of learning models. Those states have stepped forward and have basically taken on creating innovative education spaces. And there are many states that are starting to look at this. One of the things that excites us about conferences like the one that we're engaging in right here is getting all the thought leaders together, and so that we can all start to be on the same page. It's possible that in a few years' time, we can start to build an infrastructure that will allow for next generation education to be available to everybody in the country. And the people that are at this conference and the people that CCSO is working with in the innovation labs, those states that have stepped forward to create the LEARN system, to create the data structures that will allow for this kind of data migration, those people and those states are the ones that are going to make this happen. And we're committed to working with them and in partnership with them and in partnership with the vendor community that's doing this. In partnership with companies like Agilix, so a partnership with companies like Microsoft, companies like the publisher companies, all the companies that are really looking forward and trying to create this reality to happen now. And the time has come. It's my belief that there's an incredibly lucrative and profitable business model if vendors start opening up their systems to connect to all the other systems. And that will put them ahead of the game. There'll be RFPs requiring that, and then the vendors who do it early can actually demonstrate that they can do it rather than just saying that they do it. And those vendors will have an incredible advantage over other business partners that are in this space. And it will start to instigate the kind of change we've been talking about, the next generation learning we've been talking about. So I think the time has come where opening up systems will make that happen. All those things, what they will allow for is allow for a world where a student can walk into a new school in a new state they have never been at before, and on the first day, those teachers can see the longitudinal history of that student. That will make teachers' jobs much easier, and it will make students have much greater chance of success. You'll see far more students succeeding in a tailored environment for their education than you do now. It becomes really the vision, the dream of lifelong learning, of education being something that's available to everyone all the time in some consistent way that makes sense from the moment they come to early intervention at 2 years old to them retraining at 60 to work on some new technology that never existed when they were 25. That's possible in this system, and that's why I do this, and that's why we should do this. And that's why everyone at this conference needs to get on board with the standards work, with the innovation work, and with the partnership and working together.
What we're really attempting to do with all of those pieces, where we're talking about transformed actions by both the sort of supply side and the demand side, is to build bridges to allow for information to flow seamlessly from locus to locus in education and from point in time to point in time. So let's imagine that we're talking about John in Utah, who's grown up in an education system there that wants to understand how he's doing after he's left their secondary school. They can't right now get information on how he's performing when he goes to Yale in Connecticut. We want to change that. We want to build a bridge between those places so that we can all know better about what's going on and learn the kinds of interventions that are going to get more kids into Yale and fewer to jail.
I have one child that has Asperger's syndrome. I have another child that is in the mainstream education. I have another child that's going to a private Montessori school. All three of my children, I see if they could have access to a growth plan that could follow them wherever they go, that excites me. That's what I want for my children. That's what I want for everybody's children. And so that's how I see that impacting and why I've been fighting for this for 11 years now.
Well, we understand you have a very diverse set of stakeholders present in the room, and we think that's marvelous because we have to work with everybody. This is going to be an effort that's big enough that all of us have to throw in our hands, our willing hands and our open minds and our passionate hearts.